The transport ship hummed through space toward the small moon of Kepler-4 for to see. Dr. Lee. Hannah sat in her cramped seat and watched the stars drift past the window. Her hands shook slightly as she held her transfer papers. This was not where she wanted to be. 3 months ago, she had been the lead scientist on Europa Station. She had a team of 12 researchers and access to the galaxy's best equipment. Now she was heading to a wildlife sanctuary on a forgotten moon. Her career was in ruins. The pilot's voice crackled over the speakers. Landing in 10 minutes. Welcome. To the middle of nowhere. Hannah closed her eyes. The middle of nowhere was exactly right. The moon's surface was covered in thick forests and rolling hills. The air was clean and breathable, thanks to 40 years of terraforming work. As the transport landed, Hannah could see a cluster of white buildings surrounded by massive enclosed habitats. This was the Galactic Conservation Corps facility, the last place in the galaxy where Earth's extinct predators lived again. Commander Kim Ji-ho met her at the landing pad. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. He looked like someone who had seen too much disappointment. "Dr. Lee," he said, shaking her hand. "Welcome to Sanctuary Station. I hope you're ready for a challenge." "I'm ready for whatever you have," Hannah replied, trying to sound confident. Ji-ho led her through the main complex. The walls were lined with pictures of various Earth animals that had been brought back from extinction. Tigers, wolves, eagles, and dozens of other species that had died out centuries ago. "We've had great success with most of our programs," Ji-ho explained as they walked. "The mammals adapted well to handlers, the smaller birds too. But we have one group that remains completely wild." They stopped in front of a large window that looked into an enormous habitat. Hannah gasped at what she saw inside. The habitat was designed like a mountain range, with tall cliffs and deep valleys. The air inside shimmered with heat waves and wind currents. And flying through that space were the most beautiful and terrifying birds she had ever seen. But these were not the small falcons she had read about in history books. These birds were massive, with wingspans that reached nearly 3 meters. Their eyes were dark and intelligent, and their movements were perfect. They flew through the habitat like they owned the air itself. "They're incredible," Hannah whispered. "They're dangerous," Ji-ho corrected. "We've tried for 2 years to establish any kind of relationship with them. 3 researchers have been hospitalized. The birds seem to know when someone is approaching from impossible distances. They attack without warning." Hannah watched as one of the falcons landed on a high perch. The bird's head turned toward the window, and for a moment, she felt like it was looking directly at her. The falcon's eyes were ancient and knowing, as if it held secrets from another time. "How were they created?" she asked. "That's a question for Dr. Park Min-ho, our geneticist," Ji-ho said. "He's the one who brought them back. The process was different from our other projects." They continued the tour, but Hannah's mind kept returning to the falcons. There was something about them that felt familiar, though she couldn't explain why. Her quarters were small, but comfortable. That evening, she sat at her desk and read through the research files. The Falcon project had started 5 years ago when miners on an asteroid discovered something extraordinary. Deep in the rock, they found pieces of ancient amber that contained perfectly preserved biological material. But this wasn't ordinary DNA. The amber held what Dr. Park called quantum-preserved neural patterns. These were complete maps of the creatures, brains, and nervous systems frozen in time. When the falcons were recreated, they weren't just genetic copies. They carried the actual memories and instincts of their ancient ancestors. Hannah felt a chill as she read. No wonder the birds seemed so intelligent. They were literally the same creatures that had hunted Earth's skies millions of years ago. The next morning, she met Dr. Park Min-ho in his laboratory. He was a young man with gentle hands and excited eyes. His lab was filled with complex equipment and displays showing genetic sequences. "The falcons are my greatest achievement and my greatest failure," he told her. "I gave them life, but I couldn't give them peace. They don't understand this world. They remember a different Earth, a different sky." "What do you mean?" Hannah asked. Park pulled up a holographic display of brain scans. "Look at these neural patterns. They show memories of flying with other creatures, not just other falcons, but something else, something we haven't identified yet." The scans showed complex interaction patterns, as if the falcons had once shared their thoughts with other beings. There were pathways in their brains that seemed designed for communication. Beyond normal bird calls, they're looking for something that isn't here, Part continued, or someone. That afternoon, Hannah stood alone in the observation room overlooking the falcon habitat. She watched the birds soar through their artificial mountain range. They moved, with purpose, but there was something sad in their flight patterns. They were searching. One of the falcons, a large female with dark markings, suddenly changed direction. She flew straight toward the observation window and landed on a perch just meters away. The bird stared at Hannah with intense golden eyes. For several minutes, they looked at each other through the reinforced glass. Hannah felt something strange happening. The air in the observation room seemed to move differently. She could sense the wind currents inside the habitat, feel the way the air flowed around the falcon's wings. The falcon tilted her head, as if she too sensed something changing. "Hello," Hannah whispered. The falcon's eyes widened slightly. She spread her wings and gave a call that was both beautiful and haunting. Then she launched herself back into the air, flying in a complex pattern that looked almost like a dance. Other staff members arrived for the evening, feeding. They were surprised to find Hannah still there, still watching. "That's the alpha female," said Dr. Yoon Sora, one of the veterinarians. "She's the most aggressive of the group. Usually she attacks the moment she sees movement near the window." "She didn't attack me," Hannah said quietly. "That's impossible. She's hospitalized to people just for walking past." Hannah looked back at the habitat. The alpha female was perched on her favorite spot, but she was facing the observation window, waiting. That night, Hannah couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the falcon's eyes and the strange sensation she had felt. There was a connection there, something deeper than simple animal observation. She returned to Park's research files and found something interesting. The quantum-preserved neural patterns showed that the ancient falcons had been more than just predators. They had been partners. The brain scans revealed pathways for complex cooperation with other species. But what species? What had these magnificent birds once partnered with? As she read deeper into the files, a terrible and wonderful possibility began to form in her mind. The missing partners in the falcon's memories might not be extinct after all. They might be standing right in front of them, having forgotten who they used to be. The next morning, Hannah made a decision that would change everything. She was going to enter the habitat. She was going to meet the falcons face to face. Commander Ji-ho tried to stop her, but she had already made up her mind. Something was calling her toward those birds, something ancient and powerful that she couldn't ignore. The Falcon Sanctuary held secrets that were about to be revealed, and Dr. Lee Hannah was going to be the key that unlocked them all. The morning air was cool as Hannah stood outside the falcon habitat entrance. Her hands were steady now, but her heart was beating fast. Commander Ji-ho had tried one last time to talk her out of this, but she had refused to listen. "This is madness," Dr. Yoon Sora said, checking Hannah's protective gear. "These birds have never let anyone get close." "Maybe they were waiting for the right person," Hannah replied. The habitat door was thick steel with multiple locks. As it opened, Hannah felt a rush of wind from inside. The air smelled different here, wild and ancient. She stepped through the threshold and heard the door seal behind her. The inside of the habitat was even more impressive than it looked from the observation room. The artificial cliffs rose 30 meters high, and the space was filled with the sound of wind moving through stone passages. But what struck her most was the silence. All the falcons had stopped flying. They perched on various ledges and stared down at her. Hannah counted 12 birds, all magnificent and all completely still. Their golden eyes tracked her every movement. She walked slowly toward the center of the habitat. The ground was covered with soft grass and scattered rocks that looked real enough to be from Earth itself. Above her, the ceiling was transparent, showing the real sky of the moon. One falcon dropped from its perch and landed on a rock just 10 meters away. It was the alpha female, the one who had stared at her through the window. The bird was even more impressive up close. Her feathers were dark brown with lighter streaks, and her talons were like curved daggers. Hannah stopped walking and slowly raised her right arm. She had no glove, no protection except the thin fabric of her jumpsuit. If the falcon wanted to hurt her, there was nothing to stop it. "Hello, beautiful," she said softly. The falcon tilted her head and made a sound that was almost like a question. Then she spread her wings wide, showing their full span. Hannah gasped. The wings were enormous, easily 3 meters from tip to tip. But the falcon didn't attack. Instead, she folded her wings and hopped closer. Now she was only 5 meters away. Other falcons began landing around them. They formed a loose circle, but none of them showed aggression. They seemed curious, as if they were trying to understand what Hannah was. The alpha female took another hop forward. Now, she was close enough that Hannah could see every detail of her face. The bird's eyes were not just golden, but seemed to hold flecks of amber and bronze. They were ancient eyes, eyes that had seen things no modern creature could imagine. Slowly, very slowly, the falcon extended her neck toward Hannah's outstretched arm. "That's it," Hannah whispered. "I'm not going to hurt you." The falcon's beak touched Hannah's wrist, just barely. It was a gentle touch, almost like a kiss. Then the bird pulled back and made a soft, chittering sound. Something amazing happened next. The other falcons began making the same sound, creating a chorus of gentle calls. It was completely different from the harsh cries they had made when other humans approached. The alpha female spread her wings again. But this time it looked like an invitation rather than a threat. She took a small jump and landed on a rock closer. To Hannah's arm level. "You want to perch on my arm, don't you?" Hannah said. "But you're not sure if I'm strong enough." The falcon bobbed her head up and down as if she understood. Hannah braced her arm and kept it perfectly steady. The falcon studied her for a long moment, then gracefully stepped onto her wrist. The weight was incredible. The bird was much heavier than Hannah had expected, at least 15 kilograms of pure muscle and bone. But more shocking was what happened. The moment the falcon's talons touched her skin, the world changed suddenly. Hannah could feel air currents she had never noticed before. She sensed the way wind moved around the rocks, how it spiraled up the cliff faces, how it created invisible rivers in the sky. The sensation was overwhelming and wonderful at the same time. The falcon, who Hannah decided to call Baram after the Korean word for wind, seemed just as surprised. Her grip tightened slightly, but not enough to hurt. The bird's head turned to look directly into Hannah's eyes. For several heartbeats, they stared at each other. Hannah felt like she was looking into the memories of an ancient world, a place where the sky belonged to creatures like Baram, and somehow she felt like she belonged there too. "Incredible," came a voice from the observation room speakers. It was Dr. Park Minho. "Dr. Lee, can you hear me?" "I can hear you," Hannah replied, not taking her eyes off Baram. "How do you feel? Any dizziness or disorientation?" "I feel amazing," she said. And it was true. The sensation of feeling the wind patterns was like discovering a new sense she never knew she had. Baram made a low sound and gently nibbled at Hannah's hair. It was an affectionate gesture, the kind a bird might make to a mate or close companion. The other falcons moved closer, forming a tighter circle around them. Over the next hour, more remarkable things happened. Baram began showing Hannah around the habitat, flying short distances and waiting for her to follow on foot. The bird seemed to be introducing her to the territory, pointing out the best perches and the places where the wind was strongest. Other falcons began approaching as well. A younger male landed on Hannah's shoulder, while another perched on her other arm. Soon she was covered with birds, all of them calm and gentle. "This is unprecedented." Dr. Park's voice came through the speakers again. "The falcons are treating you like part of their flock." But Hannah was beginning to understand that it was more than that. The falcons weren't just accepting her, they were recognizing her. The way they looked at her, the way they touched her, it was like they were greeting an old friend. When feeding time came, Baram did something that shocked everyone watching. She caught a fish from the habitat stream and brought it to Hannah. Dropping it at her feet, it was an offering, the kind of gift that falcons gave, only to their most trusted companions. "She's presenting you with food," Dr. Yunsora said over the speakers. "That's mating behavior. Or pack bonding." "Pack bonding," Hannah repeated. The words felt right. As the day went on, Hannah learned more about her new companions. Each falcon had a distinct personality. Baram was the natural leader, strong and confident. The young male she named Hanyul was playful and curious. An older female named Nuri was wise and watchful. But the most remarkable discovery came when Hannah tried to understand how she could sense the wind patterns. Every time Bahram moved her wings, Hannah felt the air currents change. When the falcon adjusted her position, Hannah could feel the shift in air pressure. It was as if they were connected, sharing senses across species. That evening, as Hannah prepared to leave the habitat, Bahram did something unexpected. She flew to the highest perch and gave a long, complex call. The other falcons answered, creating a song that echoed off the artificial cliffs. "What are they doing?" Hannah asked Dr. Parks. Voice was filled with wonder. "I think they're singing. I've never heard them make sounds like that before." As Hannah walked toward the exit, Bahram flew down and landed on her arm one more time. The falcon looked into her eyes and made a soft sound that seemed almost like a promise. "I'll be back tomorrow," Hannah told her. Bahram rubbed her head against Hannah's cheek, then flew back to her perch. But she didn't take her eyes off Hannah until the habitat door closed. Outside, Commander Jiho and Dr. Park were waiting with expressions of amazement. "How is this possible?" Jiho asked. "I don't know," Hannah replied, "but I think we're about to find out." That night, Hannah's dreams were filled with images of flying. She soared over ancient landscapes with Bahram beside her, riding wind currents that stretched across continents. In her dreams, the sky was not empty space, but a highway of invisible forces that she could see and control. When she awoke, she could still feel the wind. The second day in the habitat changed everything. Hannah arrived early in the morning, before the sun had fully risen over the moon's horizon. The falcons were waiting for her. As soon as she stepped through the door, Bahram flew down from her high perch and landed on Hannah's arm without hesitation. The connection was stronger now. Hannah could feel the air moving through Bahram's feathers, sensed the tiny adjustments the falcon made to balance on her arm. But more than that, she could feel something else stirring inside herself. "Good morning, beautiful," Hannah said, stroking Bahram's chest feathers. Bahram made a pleased sound and nuzzled against Hannah's cheek. Then she spread her wings wide and gave a sharp call. What happened next was impossible to explain. The air in the habitat began to move differently. Hannah could see the wind currents like visible streams of light. They flowed around the rocks, spiraled up the cliff faces, and created patterns in the air that looked almost like roads. And somehow, she knew she could change them. Hannah focused. On a spot near the center of the habitat where the air was still, she imagined warm air rising from the ground, creating an updraft. To her amazement, it worked. A thermal current formed exactly where she had pictured it. Bahram screeched with excitement and launched herself into the new air current. She rode it effortlessly, climbing higher than she had ever flown in the habitat before. The other falcons quickly joined her, all of them dancing in the artificial wind that Hannah had created. "Dr. Lee," came Dr. Park's voice through the speakers. "What just happened? Our instruments are showing massive changes in air pressure inside the habitat." Hannah stared at her hands. "I think I made wind," she said quietly. "That's impossible." "Watch," Hannah said. She focused again, this time imagining a gentle breeze flowing from the north wall to the south wall. The air began to move exactly as she pictured it. Dust and loose feathers drifted across the habitat floor. Following the path she had created, Bahram dove down from her thermal and landed on Hannah's arm again. The falcon's eyes were bright with intelligence and something that looked almost like pride. Over the next several hours, Hannah experimented with her new ability. She discovered she could create updrafts, downdrafts, and crosswinds. She could make the air thick and heavy, or light and flowing. The falcons seemed to understand what she was doing and helped her learn by showing her how they used different air currents for flying. But the most amazing moment came when Hannah tried to fly with them. She couldn't actually leave the ground, of course, but when she spread her arms and focused on the wind patterns, she felt herself becoming lighter. The air around her began to support her weight, and for brief moments she could jump higher and farther than should have been possible. Bahram flew beside her during these experiments, calling encouragement and adjusting her own flight to match Hannah's movements. It was as if they were learning to fly together. "This is incredible," Dr. Park said over the speakers. "Dr. Lee, I need you to come to my lab immediately. I think I understand what's happening." Reluctantly, Hannah said goodbye to the falcons and left the habitat. Bahram watched her go with sad eyes. but she seemed to understand that Hannah would return in Dr. Park's laboratory. The young scientist was practically vibrating with excitement. He had multiple screens showing brain scans, genetic sequences, and atmospheric readings. "Look at this," he said, pointing to a brain scan. "This is your neural activity from this morning." The scan showed Hannah's brain lighting up in areas that had never been active before. Whole sections that had been dormant were now glowing with activity. "These are the same areas that show activity in the Falcon's quantum-preserved neural patterns," Dr. Park explained. "But in humans, these brain regions have been inactive for thousands of years." "What does that mean?" Hannah asked. "It means the Falcons are waking up parts of your brain that evolution shut down long ago." Dr. Park pulled up another display. "Look at these genetic markers." The screen showed DNA sequences that Hannah didn't recognize. Every human carries these genes, but they're normally dormant. They're ancient, older than recorded history. But when you bonded with Barum, something triggered them to activate. Hannah stared at the genetic data. "What do these genes do?" "As far as I can tell, they control atmospheric manipulation, the ability to sense and influence air currents, pressure systems, maybe even weather patterns." "That's impossible. Humans can't control weather. Modern humans can't," Dr. Park corrected. "But what if ancient humans could? What if this was a natural human ability that we lost over time?" He pulled up the Falcon brain scans again. The quantum-preserved neural patterns show clear evidence of cooperative behavior with another species. The Falcon's ancestors worked with partners who could manipulate atmospheric conditions. Those partners weren't other birds. You'd think they were human, Hannah said. "I think they were our ancestors. Humans and Falcons evolved together as partners. We helped them fly, and they helped us understand the sky." The implications were staggering. If Dr. Park was right, then humans had once been capable of incredible abilities. The partnership with Falcons hadn't just been about hunting or companionship. It had been about shared evolution, two species growing stronger together. "Why did we lose these abilities?" Hannah asked. "Mass extinction events? Climate changes. When the great predatory birds died out, humans lost their partners. Without the Falcons to trigger and strengthen these neural pathways, the abilities faded away over generations. But now they're coming back. Because you've re-established the bond, Barum's quantum-preserved memories are teaching your brain to remember what it once knew." Hannah thought about the sensation of creating wind currents, the feeling of lightness when she jumped. How strong can these abilities become? I don't know. The ancient neural patterns suggest capabilities far beyond what you've shown so far. Weather control, atmospheric navigation, maybe even flight, not with wings, but by manipulating air density and pressure around your body. The physics are theoretically possible. That afternoon, Hannah returned to the habitat with new understanding. When Barum landed on her arm, she felt the connection differently. It wasn't just emotional bonding or even shared senses. It was two halves of an ancient partnership coming back together. She spent hours practicing with the Falcons, learning to create more complex wind patterns. The birds seemed to understand that she was remembering rather than learning, and they helped guide her through techniques that felt familiar despite being completely new. By evening, Hannah could create thermal currents strong enough to lift objects. Off the ground, she could generate focused air blasts that could knock over small rocks. Most impressively, she could sense weather patterns forming outside the habitat. Feeling storm systems that were still hours away from arriving. "The bond is strengthening faster than I expected," Dr. Park told her as she prepared to leave. "Your brain activity has doubled since this morning." "How do you feel about that, Commander?" Jeho asked. He had been watching the day's experiments with growing concern. "I feel like I'm becoming who I was always meant to be," Hannah replied. That night, she dreamed again of flying, but this time, the dreams felt like memories. She soared over vast landscapes with Barum and her ancestors, riding wind currents that spanned continents. In her dreams, humans and Falcons worked together to guide storms, create rain for crops, and navigate by reading the invisible highways of the sky. She saw ancient cities where humans lived in harmony with great birds, where the partnership between species had created abilities that seemed like magic to modern eyes. She watched as her ancestors danced with the wind itself, shaping weather and riding air currents as easily as walking. When she woke, Hannah knew that she was remembering her species' true history. Humans hadn't conquered the natural world. They had been part of it, partners with the creatures of the sky. And now, thanks to Barum and the other Falcons, they could be again. The next morning brought news that would change everything. A message had arrived from the Galactic Council. Word of Hannah's abilities had somehow reached the highest levels of galactic government. The Zelari Empire, the avian species that controlled most atmospheric navigation in the galaxy, was sending a delegation to investigate. They had heard impossible rumors about humans developing flight capabilities, and they were not pleased. Commander Jeho delivered the news with a grim expression. "They'll be here in 3 days. And Dr. Lee there. Not coming to congratulate you. The Zelri consider atmospheric control to be their exclusive domain. If they believe humans are developing competing abilities." "What?" Hannah asked. "They might decide that the Falcon project is too dangerous to continue." Hannah looked toward the habitat where Barum was waiting. The bond between them was just beginning to develop. If the Zelari forced them to stop now, humanity might lose its chance to reclaim its ancient heritage. She would not let that happen. The Zelari ships arrived like a storm cloud on the horizon. 3 sleek vessels descended from orbit, their hulls gleaming silver against the moon's pale sky. They landed outside Sanctuary Station with mechanical precision, and Hannah watched from her window as tall, bird-like figures emerged from the craft. The Zelari were impressive creatures. They stood nearly 3 meters tall, with elongated limbs and hollow bones that made them perfectly adapted for flight. Their faces were sharp and angular, with large eyes that could track the smallest movement. Most striking of all were their natural wings, which folded against their backs like living cloaks. Ambassador Kong Daeon had arrived the day before to represent humanity's interests. She was a small woman with steel in her voice and experience dealing with alien politics. She met Hannah in the conference room an hour before the Zelari delegation was scheduled to arrive. "They're here to prove that humans cannot possibly have atmospheric abilities," Ambassador Kong explained. "The Zelari Empire's entire power structure is built on being the only species that can naturally control air currents and weather patterns." "Happens if they're convinced we can do it?" Hannah asked. "Best case scenario, they demand we stop all research and destroy the Falcons. Worst case, they consider it an act of war." Commander Jeho joined them, looking tired and worried. Their leader is High Wing Commander Serix. He's known for being aggressive and quick to use force. He's already demanded to see a demonstration of your abilities. "I'll show them," Hannah said simply. "Dr. Lee, you need to understand the stakes here. If you demonstrate abilities that match or exceed Zelari capabilities, it could trigger a galactic conflict, and if I don't, they'll destroy the Falcons, and humanity will lose its chance to reclaim its heritage." Hannah stood up. "I won't let that happen." The meeting took place in the main conference room. High Wing Commander Serix entered. First, his massive wings creating shadows on the walls. His eyes were cold yellow, and his voice was sharp when he spoke. "So," he said, looking directly at Hannah, "you are the human who claims to control the wind." "I don't claim anything," Hannah replied calmly. "I simply work with my partner." "Partner?" Serix's voice held contempt. "The Zelari have been masters of atmospheric manipulation for 10,000 years. We evolved these abilities naturally. You expect us to believe that a primitive species like humanity can suddenly develop similar powers through what?" Playing with reconstructed birds, Ambassador Kong stepped forward. "Everything is competition when survival is at stake," Serix replied. "If humans possess atmospheric manipulation abilities, it threatens the balance of power that has kept the galaxy stable." Dr. Park had prepared a presentation showing the quantum-preserved neural patterns and the genetic evidence of ancient human abilities. But Serix dismissed it all with a wave of his wing. "Theories and speculation," he said. "I want to see proof. Real demonstration of actual abilities." "Very well, Commander," Jeho said. "Dr. Lee will demonstrate her partnership with the Falcons in our atmospheric maze facility." The atmospheric maze was a testing ground that had been built to challenge Zelari pilots. It was a 3-dimensional course filled with changing wind patterns, thermal pockets, and pressure barriers. Only the most skilled Zelari could navigate it successfully. "Your human can guide her bird through the maze without artificial assistance. I will consider that she possesses genuine atmospheric awareness," Serix said. But if she fails, you will terminate this project immediately." An hour later, they stood in the observation deck overlooking the maze. The course was a complex structure of metal frameworks, wind generators, and pressure chambers that created constantly shifting atmospheric conditions. Sensors throughout the maze would detect any use of technological assistance. Hannah entered the starting chamber. With Bahram perched on her arm, the Falcon was alert and ready, her golden eyes focused on the maze ahead. Through their bond, Hannah could feel Bahram's excitement and confidence. "Begin when ready," came Sirix's voice through the speakers. Hannah closed her eyes and extended her senses. Immediately, she could feel the wind patterns throughout the maze. Air currents flowed like rivers through the structure, some fast and turbulent, others slow and steady. There were thermal pockets that would provide lift and pressure barriers that would try to push them off course. But more than just sensing the conditions, Hannah found she could influence them. She opened her eyes and looked at Bahram, ready to show them how it's done. Bahram screeched with enthusiasm and launched herself into the maze. What happened next amazed everyone watching. Hannah and Bahram moved through the course like they were dancing. When they encountered a pressure barrier, Hannah weakened it just enough for Bahram to slip through. When they needed more lift, she created thermal currents that carried them higher. When the wind was too turbulent, she smoothed it into gentle flowing streams. But she didn't just adapt to the maze's conditions, she improved them. Air currents that had been chaotic became organized. Pressure systems that fought against each other found harmony. The entire atmospheric environment of the maze transformed into something more efficient and beautiful than its designers had ever imagined. Bahram flew with impossible grace, riding wind currents that seemed to anticipate her every movement. She performed aerial maneuvers that would have been difficult even in perfect conditions. But in the maze, they should have been impossible. The course that typically took skilled ZLRA pilots 15 minutes to complete, Hannah and Bahram finished in less than 8 when they emerged from the final section. The observation deck was completely silent. Sirix stared at the sensor readings with disbelief. "This is impossible. The atmospheric conditions you created, they exceed our theoretical maximums." "How?" asked another Zellery officer. Dr. Park stepped forward. "Because they're not using technology to force the air to obey them. They're working with it, understanding it on a level that allows them to guide rather than control." "The human and the bird move as one entity," Sirix said quietly. "They share awareness and ability in ways that our scientists said were impossible." Ambassador Kong saw an opportunity. "Commander Sirix, what you've witnessed today isn't a threat to your people. It's proof that different species can work together to achieve things that neither could accomplish alone." But Sirix's expression was hardening. "What I've witnessed is a species developing abilities that could challenge Zellari supremacy. This cannot be allowed to continue." "You're afraid," Hannah said, still holding Bahram on her arm. "You've built your entire empire on the belief that only Zellari can master the sky. But that was never true, was it?" Sirix's eyes flashed with anger. "Humans are a young species. You don't understand the responsibilities that come with atmospheric power. Weather control, storm guidance, atmospheric navigation. These abilities affect entire planets. In the wrong hands, they could destroy ecosystems, kill millions. Then teach us," Hannah said simply. "Work with us instead of trying to suppress us. Impossible. The risk is too great." "The risk of what? That humans might be better at this than you are?" The words hung in the air like a challenge. Sirix spread his wings to their full span, a gesture of dominance and threat. "Very well," he said finally. "If you believe your abilities are so superior, prove it. I challenge you to aerial combat, Zellora style. If you win, humanity may continue this research. If you lose, the Falcons are destroyed and all research is terminated." Sirix Ambassador Kong said urgently, "That's hardly a fair contest. Humans can't naturally fly." "She doesn't need to," Sirix replied, looking directly at Hannah. "If her atmospheric manipulation is truly superior to ours, she should be able to achieve flight through wind control alone, unless of course her abilities are not as impressive as she claims." Hannah felt Bahram's grip tighten on her arm. Through their bond, she sensed the Falcon's determination and readiness for battle. "When and where?" Hannah asked. "Tomorrow at dawn, in the upper atmosphere of this moon. We will see who truly masters the sky. As the Zelari delegation left the facility, Commander Jiho looked at Hannah with concern. You don't have to do this. We can find another way. No, Hannah said, stroking Baram's feathers. This was always going to happen. The Zelari need to understand that the sky belongs to everyone who respects it, not just to those who were born with wings. That night, Hannah spent hours in the habitat with all the falcons. They seemed to understand what was coming. Baram and the others flew complex patterns around her, sharing techniques and knowledge that had been preserved in their quantum memories for millions of years. As dawn approached, Hannah felt ready. She had the wisdom of ancient falcons, the determination of her species, and the power of a bond that transcended evolution itself. Tomorrow, she would show the galaxy what humans could truly achieve when they remembered who they were meant to be. The night before the challenge, Dr. Park made a discovery that changed everything they thought they knew about human history. He had been working through the night, analyzing deeper layers of the quantum-preserved neural patterns from the falcons. What he found in the oldest memory fragments made him call an emergency meeting at 3 a.m. You need to see this immediately, he told Commander Jiho over the comm, and bring Dr. Lee. This changes everything. Hannah arrived at the lab still tired from her training session with the falcons. She found Dr. Park surrounded by holographic displays showing complex neural networks and genetic sequences. I've been analyzing the deepest memory layers in the falcon neural patterns, he said without preamble. The quantum preservation goes back much further than we thought. These memories aren't just from Earth's recent history, they go back millions of years. He activated a display showing brain scan comparisons. Look at this. The cooperative neural pathways in the falcons' minds show clear evidence of symbiotic evolution, but not just with one species. The patterns indicate multiple partnerships. Over vast periods of time. What does that mean? Commander Jiho asked. It means the falcons' ancestors weren't just partners with early humans. They were partners with the species that humans evolved from. This relationship shaped human development from the very beginning. Dr. Park pulled up genetic analysis charts. Every human carries dormant genes for atmospheric manipulation, electromagnetic sensitivity, and enhanced spatial awareness. But these aren't recent mutations. They're ancient fundamental parts of human DNA. Hannah stared at the genetic data. You're saying humans were designed to work with falcons? I'm saying humans and falcons evolved together in a symbiotic relationship that lasted millions of years. The abilities you're demonstrating aren't new developments. They're humanity's original nature, suppressed by separation from your natural partners. He activated another display showing historical climate data. Look at this. During periods when large predatory birds thrived on Earth, human civilization advanced rapidly. When mass extinction events eliminated the great raptors, human progress slowed or even reversed. The Dark Ages, Commander Jiho said suddenly. The collapse of ancient civilizations. They all correspond to periods when large birds of prey went extinct in those regions. Exactly. Humans didn't just lose companions when the great birds died. They lost fundamental abilities that had been essential to their development. Dr. Park's excitement was building as he shared his discoveries. The atmospheric manipulation you're displaying is just the beginning. The genetic markers suggest capabilities for electromagnetic field detection, gravitational sensing, maybe even limited telepathic communication. Telepathic communication? Hannah asked. With your falcon partners, yes. The neural pathways for it are there, dormant but intact. As your bond with Baram strengthens, you should begin to share thoughts and emotions directly, as if responding. To her name, Hannah felt a warm presence in her mind. Baram was awake in the habitat, and somehow Hannah could sense her thoughts. The falcon was calm but alert, ready for the coming challenge. She's here, Hannah whispered. I can feel her in my mind. Dr. Park nodded excitedly. The quantum-preserved memories are teaching your brain to remember abilities it possessed millions of years ago, but Dr. Lee, there's something else, something even more significant. He pulled up star charts and galactic maps. I've been researching the Zelari Empire's history. Their rise to power began about 50,000 years ago. After the last great extinction event on Earth eliminated most large predatory birds. Coincidence? Commander Jiho asked. I don't think so. Look at Zelari atmospheric manipulation techniques. They're crude compared to what you demonstrated yesterday. They use brute force to control air currents, fighting against natural patterns rather than working with them. Because they evolved their abilities independently, Hannah realized, they never had the symbiotic relationship that taught them to cooperate with atmospheric systems. Exactly. The Zelari became dominant because there was no competition. But if humans had maintained their partnerships with the great birds, the Zelari would never have achieved galactic supremacy. Dr. Park activated a final display showing projected capability comparisons. Based on the genetic potential I'm seeing, fully bonded human Falcon teams should be able to achieve atmospheric manipulation capabilities that exceed Zelari abilities by several orders of magnitude. Weather control on a planetary scale, Commander Jiho said, reading the projections. Storm, creation and dissipation. Atmospheric navigation without technology, that's just the beginning. The deeper neural patterns suggest possibilities for space navigation, using stellar magnetic fields, communication across vast distances through electromagnetic manipulation, even limited control over gravitational fields. Hannah felt a chill as she understood the implications. The Zelari aren't just afraid of competition, they're afraid of being completely obsoleted. Which is why this challenge is so dangerous, Dr. Park continued. If you demonstrate even a fraction of these capabilities, Syrinx will realize that humanity represents an existential threat to Zelari civilization. Then maybe I shouldn't fight him, Hannah said. No, came a voice from the doorway. Ambassador Kong entered the lab, looking determined. You have to fight him, because if you don't, humanity will never know what it's truly capable of. She joined them around the holographic displays. I've been in contact with the Galactic Council. Word of your abilities has already spread. Other species are watching this challenge closely. If humans back down now, we'll be seen as weak and fraudulent. And if you win decisively, it proves that humanity deserves recognition as an atmospheric species with all the rights and territories that status provides. Entire star systems with suitable worlds would be opened to human colonization. Commander Jiho looked concerned. And if the victory is too decisive, the Zelari might decide we're too dangerous to allow continued existence. That's a risk we have to take, Ambassador Kang said. Humanity has been held back for too long by other species who benefit from our perceived limitations. This is our chance to claim our rightful place in the galaxy. The hours before dawn passed quickly. Hannah spent time with all the Falcons, feeling her connection to them strengthen through Barum. She could sense the thoughts and emotions of the entire flock. They were excited, ready to show the galaxy what the ancient partnership could achieve. Dr. Park provided her with a communication device and monitoring equipment that would record everything that happened during the challenge. Whatever occurs up there, we need documentation. This could be the most important moment in human history. As the sun began to rise, Hannah stood on the launch platform with Barum on her arm. The Falcon was magnificent in the morning light, her feathers gleaming and her eyes bright with intelligence and determination. High-Wing Commander Syrinx approached from the Zelari camp. His artificial flight suit was sleek and technological, equipped with gravity manipulators and atmospheric processors. He looked confident and dismissive. Last chance to withdraw, he said to Hannah, "Admit that your abilities are a trick, and I will recommend lenient treatment for your species." "The only trick here," Hannah replied, "is that you've convinced yourself you're the masters of the sky. Today you'll learn the truth." Syrinx's eyes narrowed. "We shall see." They ascended to the upper atmosphere using separate transport craft. At 20,000 meters above the moon's surface, they would begin their contest. The rules were simple: aerial combat using only natural abilities, until one opponent was forced to yield or retreat. As Hannah's transport reached the designated altitude, she could see Syrinx hovering nearby in his flight suit. His artificial wings glowed with energy fields, and atmospheric processors created visible distortions around his body. Hannah stepped out of the transport with no artificial assistance except the communication device. Barum launched herself into the thin air and began circling, her wings catching air currents that shouldn't have existed at that altitude. "Begin when ready," came Ambassador Kong's voice through the com-dot. Hannah closed her eyes and extended her senses. At this altitude, the air was thin and the wind patterns were completely different from the surface. But through her bond with Barum, she could feel every current, every pressure change, every electromagnetic field in the space around them. More than that, she could control them. She opened her eyes and smiled. Let's show him what the ancient partnership can really do. What happened next would be talked about across the galaxy for generations to come. 20,000 meters above the moon's surface, Hannah floated in space that should have been impossible for any human to survive. But she wasn't just human anymore. Through her bond with Barum, she had become something that her species had always been meant to be. The air around her body began to thicken and warm as she manipulated atmospheric density. She created a pocket of breathable atmosphere that moved with her, controlled by her will and Barum's ancient instincts. Her Falcon circled above, riding thermal currents that Hannah generated from the solar radiation, hitting the moon's surface far below. High-Wing Commander Syrinx hovered 50 meters away, his artificial flight suit gleaming in the sunlight. Atmospheric processors hummed around his body, and his mechanical wings beat with precise, calculated movements. Impossible, his voice crackled through the communication system. No organic being can survive at this altitude without life support. You're thinking like a Zellerie, Hannah replied calmly. You use technology to force the environment to accept you. We work with the environment as partners. Syrinx's response was to attack. He dove toward Hannah with incredible speed, his artificial wings creating pressure waves that should have sent her tumbling helplessly through the thin air. Instead, Hannah rode the pressure waves like a surfer rides ocean swells. She adjusted the air density around her body to absorb the impact, then redirected the energy to propel herself sideways. Barum dove past Syrinx's head, creating a wind shear that disrupted his flight suit's atmospheric processors. How Syrinx demanded as he struggled to regain control. Because we're not fighting the air, Hannah said. We're dancing with it. The battle that followed was unlike anything that had ever been recorded in galactic history. Syrinx used every technique in the Zellerie arsenal, creating pressure barriers, generating artificial wind shears, and manipulating gravitational fields to change the direction of his flight. But for every attack he made, Hannah had a response that seemed to come from pure instinct. When he created a pressure barrier, she turned it into a thermal that carried her higher. When he generated wind shears, she used them to accelerate her movement in unexpected directions. When he tried to trap her in gravitational fields, she manipulated electromagnetic currents to slide free. More impressive than her defensive abilities was what she did to the environment around them. The thin upper atmosphere began to change as Hannah worked with forces that Syrinx had never learned to perceive. Electromagnetic fields that usually flowed invisibly through space became visible as streams of light. Solar radiation that normally passed harmlessly through the vacuum began to interact with particles that Hannah gathered and organized. She was creating weather in space. This is impossible, Syrinx repeated, but his voice now held fear instead of confidence. Barum screeched and dove toward the Zellerie commander, but this wasn't an attack. The Falcon was demonstrating. As she flew, her wings created disturbances. In the electromagnetic fields that Hannah had made visible, the patterns were beautiful and complex, like aerial calligraphy, written in light and energy. She's trying to teach you, Hannah said. The Falcons have always been teachers. That's what the partnership was about. They showed our ancestors how to see the invisible forces that connect everything. Teachers. Syrinx's flight suit was working harder now, struggling to maintain stable flight as the electromagnetic environment around them continued to change. Your people evolved to fly, but you never learned to truly see, Hannah explained. You use machines to do what living creatures could teach you to do naturally. As if to demonstrate, Hannah began to fly without any visible means of propulsion. She moved through the space around Syrinx like she was swimming through invisible currents, her body responding to forces that his instruments couldn't detect. The truth was that she was riding the same electromagnetic fields that connected planets to their stars, that carried solar wind across vast distances, that made space navigation possible for creatures who knew how to perceive them. These were the highways that the ancient Falcons and their human partners had used to travel between worlds long before artificial spacecraft were invented. We didn't lose the ability to fly when the great birds went extinct, Hannah said, as she circled around Syrinx's increasingly frantic maneuvers. We lost the ability to see the roads through the sky. Syrinx made one final, desperate attack. He overloaded his atmospheric processors and gravity manipulators, creating a massive pressure wave that should have been enough to crush any organic creature. Hannah absorbed the entire attack and redirected it outward, creating a burst of organized energy that lit up the space around them like a miniature star. The display was so bright that it was visible from the surface of the moon, and probably from orbit as well. When the light faded, Cyrix's flight suit was dead. His atmospheric processors had burned out, his gravity manipulators were offline, and his artificial wings were barely keeping him aloft. Hannah floated nearby, completely unharmed, with Barum perched calmly on her arm. "Yield," she said simply. Cyrix struggled to speak through his failing life support systems. "I yield." But the challenge wasn't over, as Cyrix began to fall toward the moon's surface with his failed equipment. Hannah made a choice that would define humanity's place in the galaxy. She saved him, moving faster than should have been possible. She created a controlled atmospheric column that caught Cyrix's falling body and lowered him gently toward the surface. She generated thermal currents to keep him warm and pressure bubbles to help him breathe. By the time they reached the landing platform, Cyrix was alive and unharmed, but completely humbled. "Why?" he asked as they touched down. "I came here too. Destroy your people's future." "Why did you save me?" "Because that's what partners do," Hannah replied. "They help each other survive." The crowd that had gathered to watch the challenge was silent. Representatives from dozens of galactic species had come to witness what they thought would be an interesting contest between a primitive human and an advanced Zil. Instead, they had seen abilities that surpassed anything in recorded history. Ambassador Kong stepped forward, her voice carrying across the landing platform. "The Galactic Council will recognize humanity's claim to atmospheric species status. The evidence is undeniable." But Cyrix raised a wing to stop her. "No," he said, his voice carrying new respect. "What we witnessed today goes beyond atmospheric manipulation. This human demonstrated abilities that our scientists claimed were impossible." He turned to address the crowd of alien observers. "The Zelari Empire has built its power on the belief that we are the supreme masters of flight and atmospheric control. Today, I learned that we are students, not masters." Cyrix approached Hannah and performed a formal Zelari bow, spreading his wings low to the ground. "I request permission to learn from your people. The Zelari have much to offer in terms of technology and resources, but you have abilities that we desperately need." "Partnership," Hannah said, "understanding, not dominance." "Partnership," Cyrix agreed. Dr. Park rushed forward with his instruments, readings that showed energy patterns unlike anything previously recorded. "Dr. Lee, what you accomplished up there. You didn't just manipulate local atmospheric conditions, you interfaced directly with planetary electromagnetic fields. The energy readings suggest you briefly accessed stellar magnetic currents." "Stellar?" "Navigation," Ambassador Kang said, realizing the implications. "If humans can perceive and manipulate the magnetic fields that connect star systems, we can travel between worlds without artificial technology," Hannah finished, "the way our ancestors did before the great extinctions separated us from our partners." That evening, as word of the challenge spread across the galaxy, everything changed. For humanity, the Galactic Council fast-tracked humanity's petition for full atmospheric species status. Exploration rights to dozens of previously restricted star systems were granted. Most importantly, other species began requesting partnerships and knowledge exchanges, but for Hannah, the most meaningful change was smaller and more personal. As she sat in the Falcon habitat with Barum perched on her arm, she could feel the thoughts and emotions of not just her own partner, but Falcons across the facility. The bonds were spreading, growing stronger, awakening abilities that had slept for millennia through the facility's communication system. She could sense other humans, beginning to form their own partnerships with the reconstructed birds. Each new bond brought new discoveries, new abilities, new possibilities for what humanity could become. The Zelari weren't the only species that had come to observe the challenge. Representatives from dozens of worlds had witnessed human capabilities that exceeded their theoretical maximums. Some were afraid, but many were intrigued. "What happens next?" Commander Ji-ho asked as he joined Hannah in the habitat. "We remember who we were always meant to be," she replied, watching as Barum and the other Falcons performed. aerial dances that painted patterns of light in the artificial sky, and we teach others to remember too. The age of human limitations was over. The age of partnership was about to begin. 1 year after the challenge with High Wing Commander Syrinx, the galaxy was a different place. Hannah stood on the observation deck of the orbital station above New Terra, humanity's first atmospheric manipulation colony. Below her, the planet's surface was covered with cities that seemed to float on air itself. Buildings rose and fell with the natural wind patterns, connected by bridges of organized thermal currents that allowed people to travel by simply stepping into the flowing air dot. It was beautiful, and it was just the beginning. "Sky Marshal Lee," came a voice behind her. Dr. Park Min-ho approached wearing the blue uniform of the newly formed Terran Atmospheric Corps. His title was now Director of Symbiotic Research, and his work had expanded far beyond the original Falcon project. "Just Hannah," she replied with a smile. "How are the new bonding programs progressing?" "Beyond our most optimistic projections, we now have over 300 active human-Falcon partnerships across 12 worlds. Each bond reveals new abilities we didn't know were possible." Through the station's reinforced windows, they could see some of those partnerships in action. Human-Falcon teams moved through the space around the station like dolphins through water, riding electromagnetic currents that connected the planet to its star. They wore no artificial life support, needing only the atmospheric bubbles they could create and maintain through their bonds. "The Martian terraforming project," Hannah asked, completed ahead of schedule. Team leader Kim Gi-won and her partner Nu managed to establish a stable atmosphere in 6 months instead of the projected 5 years. They're already working on Venus. Hannah nodded, watching a transport ship approach the station. But this wasn't one of humanity's new organic vessels. It was a Zelari craft, sleek and technological as ever. "Syrinx is here for the monthly partnership meeting," Dr. Park explained. "The Zelari integration program has been even more successful than we hoped." The meeting room was larger now, designed to accommodate representatives from dozens of species. When Hannah entered, she saw familiar faces and some new ones. Syrinx was there, but he looked different. Gone was the arrogant confidence she remembered. In its place was a calm wisdom that came from learning humility. "Sky Marshal," he said, performing the wing bow that had become his standard greeting. "I have the monthly reports from the Zelari integration teams." Over the past year, hundreds of Zelari had come to learn from human-Falcon partnerships. They couldn't form the same bonds that humans could, but they had learned to work with the ancient techniques instead of fighting against them. "Our atmospheric navigation efficiency is up 40%, Syrinx reported. "Storm management capabilities have doubled. Most importantly, we've eliminated the environmental damage that our old brute force techniques caused to planetary atmospheres." Ambassador Kong, now Director of Interspecies Relations, smiled at the report. "The Aquari delegation is especially interested in weather management techniques. Their ocean worlds have been struggling with climate instability for decades." "We can help," Hannah said. Team leader Park Sun-ho and his partner Hanyul have developed techniques for managing hurricane systems that could easily be adapted for ocean worlds. The meeting continued with reports from across human space. The Falcon bonding programs had expanded to include other reconstructed species. Eagles, hawks, and even the massive extinct condors were being brought back to partner with selected humans. Each species offered different abilities and perspectives, but the most exciting development was happening on a deeper level. "Show them the communication breakthrough," Dr. Park said excitedly. Hannah closed her eyes and extended her consciousness. Through her bond with Barum, who was currently on New Terra's surface, she could feel the thoughts and emotions of Falcon partners across multiple star systems. The network of connected minds spanned light years, creating a communication system that was faster than any technology. "Instant communication across galactic distances," she said, opening her eyes, "not through electromagnetic signals or quantum entanglement, but through the consciousness bonds that connect living beings to the fundamental forces of the universe." The alien representatives in the room looked amazed. Several species had been working for centuries to develop faster-than-light communication. Humans had achieved it by remembering how to think like their ancient ancestors. "There's more," Dr. Park continued. "The deep memory analysis of the quantum-preserved neural patterns has revealed techniques that we're only beginning to understand. planetary atmospheric management, stellar magnetic field navigation, even limited gravitational manipulation. How? Limited? Asked the crystalline representative, whose species had struggled with gravity control for millennia. We can create localized gravity fields strong enough to move asteroids, Hannah replied. Team leader Lee Haijin and her partner Baram-2 successfully redirected a potential asteroid impact on Colony World 7 last month. The implications were staggering. Humans weren't just becoming equals to the advanced species of the galaxy. In many areas, they were becoming superior. But Hannah had learned an important lesson from her first encounter with Syrinx. Power without wisdom was dangerous. Superiority without compassion led to the same mistakes that the Zellerie had made. Which is why, she said, addressing the room, humanity is proposing the symbiotic alliance. She activated a holographic display showing the proposed alliance structure. Instead of competing for dominance, we share knowledge and abilities. Each species contributes what they do best. Together, we achieve things that none of us could accomplish alone. The Zellerie would contribute their technological expertise and manufacturing capabilities. The Aquarii would share their deep ocean exploration techniques. The crystalline would provide their mineral processing knowledge. And humans would teach the ancient partnership techniques that allowed organic beings to work with fundamental forces instead of fighting them. A galaxy of partners instead of competitors, Ambassador Kong added, cooperation instead of conquest. Over the following months, the symbiotic alliance grew. Species that had been enemies for centuries began working together. Technologies that had seemed impossible became routine when different abilities were combined. Hannah found herself traveling between worlds constantly, teaching new human Falcon teams and helping establish partnership programs with other species. But her favorite place was still the original sanctuary on Kepler-4 for Tessie, where it all began. Standing in the habitat where she had first met Baram, Hannah watched the newest generation of partnerships forming. Young humans were meeting their Falcon partners for the first time, experiencing the wonder and transformation that came with remembering their species' true nature. Any regrets? Commander Jiho asked. He had been promoted to Director of Sanctuary Operations, overseeing the expanded programs across human space. None, Handra replied, feeling Baram's presence in her mind even though the Falcon was currently soaring high above the moon's surface. We've become who we were always meant to be. Through her enhanced senses, she could feel the pulse of life across the galaxy. Human Falcon teams rode stellar winds between star systems. Partnership colonies flourished on worlds that had been considered uninhabitable. The ancient network of consciousness that connected all living things was being reawakened, one bond at a time, but perhaps the most meaningful change was happening right here, in the habitat where everything started. New Falcons were being reconstructed from quantum-preserved patterns discovered on distant worlds. Each species brought memories of different partnerships, different abilities, different ways of working with the forces that shaped reality. Dr. Park approached with a young woman who looked nervous but determined. Sky Marshal, I'd like you to meet Dr. Chomina. She's our newest researcher, and she's here to form her first partnership. Hannah smiled at the young woman. What type of Falcon? Are you hoping to work with... Actually, Dr. Cho said shyly, I was hoping to work with one of the new Golden Eagles. The quantum patterns suggest they specialized in electromagnetic field manipulation. Excellent choice. The Eagles are magnificent partners. Hannah gestured toward a section of the habitat where several large golden eagles perched on high platforms. Just remember, you don't choose your partner. They choose you. As they watched, one of the eagles, a massive female with feathers that seemed to shimmer with internal light, turned her attention toward Dr. Cho. The bird studied the young woman with intelligent eyes, then spread her wings and glided down, to land on a perch just within arm's reach. She's beautiful, Dr. Cho whispered. She's also been waiting for you, Hannah said, recognizing the signs. The eagles have been restless lately, like they were expecting someone specific. Over the next hour, they watched as Dr. Cho and the eagle began the delicate process of forming their bond. It was different from Falcon partnerships, where Falcons were quick and decisive, eagles were patient and thoughtful. The connection formed slowly, like a flower opening to the sun. When the eagle finally stepped onto Dr. Cho's arm, the change was immediate. The young woman's eyes widened as new senses awakened. Around them, the electromagnetic fields that flowed through the habitat became visible as streams of soft light. "Incredible," Dr. Cho breathed. "I can see the electrical patterns in everything. The lights, the computers, even our own nervous systems." "That's just the beginning," Hannah said. "The Eagle's quantum memories contain techniques for long distance, electromagnetic communication, electrical energy manipulation, even limited control over mechanical systems." As if to demonstrate, the eagle on Dr. Cho's arm made a soft call, and the habitat's lighting system responded, dimming and brightening in a pattern that matched the bird's vocalizations. "She's talking to the computers," Dr. Cho said in amazement. "Eagles were always the technicians of the ancient partnerships," Dr. Park explained. "While falcons specialized in atmospheric control, eagles worked with the electrical and magnetic forces that power civilization." Watching the new partnership form, Hannah felt a deep satisfaction. This was how it was supposed to be. Humans and their ancient partners working together to unlock abilities that neither could achieve alone. Her communication device chimed with an incoming message. It was from team leader Yoon Se-jin, on the edge of known space. His Falcon partner had detected something extraordinary during a deep space patrol. "Sky Marshal," his voice crackled through the long-distance connection. "We found something you need to see. A derelict ship, but not like anything in our databases. The design suggests it was built for organic atmospheric manipulation rather than technological propulsion." Hannah felt her pulse quicken. "How old?" "Preliminary scans suggest at least 50,000 years. And Sky Marshal, there are quantum-preserved patterns in the ship's structure. I think we've found evidence of the original human Falcon civilization." The implications were staggering. If they had found artifacts from humanity's ancient partnership civilization, it could reveal abilities and techniques that even the quantum-preserved Falcon memories didn't contain. "I'm on my way," Hannah said. As she prepared to leave the sanctuary, Bahram descended from the upper atmosphere and landed on her arm. Through their bond, Hannah could feel the Falcon's excitement and readiness for another adventure. One more journey. She asked her partner. Bahram's response was a joyful screech that echoed across the habitat, answered by calls from dozens of other birds. Standing at the threshold of another discovery, Hannah reflected on how much had changed since she first arrived at this remote sanctuary. She had been a disgraced scientist with a ruined career. Now she was the Sky Marshal of a new age, leading humanity toward a future that surpassed their wildest dreams. But the most important change was simpler and more profound. She was no longer alone. Through her bond with Bahram and the network of partnerships spreading across the galaxy, she was connected to something larger than herself. She was part of an ancient dance between species that had shaped the development of consciousness itself. The Falcon had chosen her, the winds had obeyed, and in that choosing, humanity had found its wings. As their ship departed for the deep space coordinates where the ancient derelict waited, Hannah looked back at the sanctuary one last time. New partnerships were forming, young humans were discovering their heritage, and the galaxy was learning that cooperation was stronger than competition. The age of human limitations was over. The age of partnership had truly begun. And somewhere in the vast network of consciousness that connected all living beings, the ancient falcons sang with joy. Their long wait was over. Their partners had finally come home. The dance between earth and sky, between human ambition and natural wisdom, between technology and organic ability, would continue across the stars. And in that dance, both species would find not just survival, but transcendence. The story that began with a broken bond had become a symphony of restored connections spanning the galaxy. And it was only the beginning.